Thank you, John.
Turn down for what?
Am I supposed to do something? I hope not. That was a great presentation, and hopefully brought us right up to today. And boy, looking out at everybody, it's an amazing crowd. So I'm really excited to be here. I just have to say, I want to echo John's thanks and just say thank you so much for spending the time with us. I know there's a lot of expense and time and energy that goes into the next couple of days and all the breakouts and trainings. It really means an awful lot to us, and it's a huge endorsement of our product and our company, and we're doing absolutely everything we can to make sure you get the most out of it. And I'll look forward to getting all of the feedback, and just to be sure that we met the goals there. So the voice of God there introduced me as John DiLullo, but I look after the worldwide sales operations, the worldwide field operations for the company, and I'm based in our Seattle headquarters. And as you might imagine, I do quite a bit of travel, being in a global job. But this trip in particular is a little bit special. And I'll just share with you, there's three things. The first one is I just celebrated my 50th birthday, so I get to do that on this trip. Thank you. I also tomorrow will celebrate my 1-year anniversary with F5, which is also another big milestone for me. And perhaps I think this is important because it's associated with a Chicago-based company. On this trip, on this last leg here, I will celebrate a major milestone with United Airlines. And I will be completing my 4 millionth mile. Now, it's about 250,000 miles to the moon. So this is somewhere around eight round trips to the moon. And as you can imagine, if you spend that much time in a plane, you have quite a few crazy travel stories. And I'm not going to share those now, maybe later. I'm sure you all have some great ones too. But what I wanted to talk about, we're going to be canned up together here for the next 2 days. I thought I would just share a story which I think is pretty funny and indicative of some of the things that are happening right now in this industry that we're all participating in. And that was, I'm going to retell for you a story. It's absolutely my very, very first business trip. And to tell this story, I have to introduce someone. This is Joyce. And back 25 years ago, when I was on my very first business trip, the way you did that was you did what? You went and opened up the Yellow Pages and looked up a travel agent. And this is who I found, Joyce. And I called Joyce and I told her I need a trip to Texas, and I need a ticket, I need a hotel room. And Joyce went to work on that. And a couple of days later, she called me. I went to her office. Now, at her office, she gave me, maybe some of you remember these, a triplicate ticket. And 2 pieces of the paper, this real flimsy carbon kind of paper. And then she asked me for my credit card, which she took an impression of, and then handed me a little folio that had the hotel that I'd be staying in. So this probably rings a bell for a lot of people. Now, the day of the trip, I was living in San Francisco. I go outside, and of course, it's pouring down rain, and it's always hard to get a taxi when it's raining, right? So I wait for almost 10 minutes. Finally, a taxi comes, and then I realize what? I realize I don't have enough cash to pay the taxi. Taxis didn't take credit cards then. And so what do? I run for the ATM. Then I wait another 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Now I'm thinking, I'm going to miss my flight. My boss is going to be really disappointed. It's my first trip, and I'm going to mess it up. And after about 15 minutes, finally a taxi arrives. It's an old, ancient taxi. It smells bad. The driver's rude. It's not exactly how I envisioned it all going, but the driver rushes, gets me to the airport. I get through. I get to my plane on time. I land. I grab a rental car. I get to the hotel. I get outside of the hotel, rush over to the conference room. I sit down. Meeting's canceled. And if you had told me right then, in that minute, that for the next 25 years I'd be circling the globe in this capacity, I never would have believed you. I never even would have thought that in a million years. But what ended up happening is that's not even the biggest event. The biggest event is how much that entire process, that travel process, has changed from that trip until today. If you think about it, it's not just the travel industry, it's also the medical industry, for example. Today, there is more diagnostic information online. You can go online today and get more diagnostic data than was available at the finest teaching hospitals 10 years ago. You can actually, today, you can connect yourself via Fitbits, you can get your own charts online, you can schedule appointments, you can leverage the internet to retrieve all types of diagnostic information about your own health. Healthcare has completely changed in the same period of time as I took that ill-fated trip. Think about the financial services industry as well. That's also completely changed. It wasn't that long ago when we took a passbook savings book into the bank and they told us how much money we had there. Today, there are more than 1 billion people in the retail banking industry that have never set foot in a bank branch. Within the next 10 years, there will be another 1 billion people added to the banking industry that have never actually been inside a bank branch. And if you think about all of us, what we do in banking today, we pay our bills, we get our direct deposits, we invest in stocks. In some cases, we can actually borrow money online. Everything about banking has changed. But let's go back, because I think it's even more interesting. We'll go back to the example of travel. And how often today, or I should say how infrequently today, do you actually ever interface with a Joyce, with a travel agent? How infrequently or growing less frequent do you actually hail a taxi? How often do you use cash when you're traveling? And the process of reserving a hotel is more like a reverse auction these days than anything like what it used to be. And when you talk about these technologies, and you're going to hear a lot about it, you're going to hear about a lot of use cases for our technology over the next 2 days, but when you think about them, when people talk about the next big thing, in this case, I hope you'll agree that they're not thinking big enough. I use a couple of examples in particular to make the point. Airbnb. Airbnb has rented 60 million rooms. 60 million rooms. If you go online to Airbnb today, you can rent up to 2 million properties in over 190 countries. That's more properties than you have access to if you have access to all of the Hyatt, Hilton, and Marriott inventory. And Airbnb today is valued at $22 billion. And you know, the Marriott chain was just sold for about half of that. So the entire chain of Marriott is not worth as much as Airbnb. And yet Airbnb doesn't own a single room. They don't bring you room service. They don't have any labor contracts. They don't host conventions. They derive their value from something completely different. Something that we are uniquely tapped into. I'll use another example, Priceline.com. Priceline.com has now sold 100 million tickets. Priceline.com is a listed company on the stock exchange. You can go see. Its value, its capitalization value today is $55 billion. That's more than the combined capitalization of American, United, and Delta. And yet they don't own a single airplane, they don't have any pilots, they don't have any landing rights. Again, they leverage the assets in a different way. They leverage information in a different way. And a final example, I think it's my favorite, is Uber. Today, Uber has a capitalization of $60 billion, worth more than BMW, GM, and Ford and yet they don't own a single vehicle. Their users exist absolutely everywhere. Their billing system is a payment application. They are an entirely virtual entity that exists by the whim of an internet connection. Welcome to the sharing economy. The sharing economy is unique. It is here. It is now. It is defined by a moment in time where the information about an asset is more valuable than the asset itself. And this is not something reserved for the purview of airlines and hotels only. This is something that's coming to every industry. If you believe the likes of IDC and Gartner and all of the futurists, all of the industries that we work with today, all of the industries that comprise our businesses today will be touched by this phenomena. The sharing economy train is entering the station. And the good news for all of us in this room is that we understand this. This is not magic. This is the science that we delve in every day. We are creating massive amounts of value because these foundational technologies that are making this happen are the ones that we live and breathe with every day. In particular, I want to draw your attention to three. The first element is data science, the management of information. All of those examples I gave you leverage not only information within the enterprise, but information outside of the enterprise. Each of those examples also leverage pervasive, agile networks, collapsing distance and making geography irrelevant. And the last element of all of those solutions shared, all of those things that opened up the economy, that liberated resources, was they leveraged effectively purpose-built, highly consumerized end-user devices. All of these technologies are pervasive. All of these technologies are going to pervade our traditional businesses now, and we have a front row seat. And that front row seat is what we're going to help illuminate over these next few days. But there's potentially some trouble in paradise here. All of the great solutions that we talk about, all of these opportunities, I gave you a few examples. 100 billion, 150 billion, maybe it's 500 billion, maybe it's $1 trillion in value that will be unlocked from our traditional enterprises. But it's all 100% based upon ones and zeros. All of those ones and zeros are widely dispersed. They're all as light as a feather. And they are incredibly susceptible to theft. Now, it is an element of human nature to try to lock things up that we value. If you go back to the medieval times, whether we had gold or jewels or plunder, we would put them behind walls. We would dig moats. We would post guards. We would cut keys. We would create secret handshakes. That's how we kept our precious assets safe. That sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? If you think about how we protect things today, the walls have become firewalls. The moat has become the DMZ. Those guards that we post are IPS and IDS agents. Those keys are cryptos. Those secret handshakes are now ASCII-based characters. But what is the real point of this? All of the examples I just gave you, all of this trillion-dollar creation of wealth is all about elements there is no dungeon, there are no walls. These are, all the data, all the applications are outside. They live virtually. They live in the cloud. They live in a variety of different devices. And yet we pin a lot of hopes every single day on patrolling the perimeter of our premise data applications. If you listen to Google, Google says last quarter that information that transited their site 77% of the time was encrypted. 77% of the traffic transiting is encrypted, and yet we spend, in some cases, as much as 90% of our IT security budgets patrolling that perimeter. That perimeter whose devices we have asked to protect us are blind to the true nature of the traffic most of the time. And if you're given some comfort with the exotic and disciplined password strategies that most of our enterprises have implemented, the truth is, and it's a tough truth, 20% of your employees would sell their credentials and their passwords for less than $1,000. Does it ever seem that the hackers and the bad actors are always a step ahead? Why is that? It's really pretty simple if you think about it, right? They only need to exploit one weakness, one single weakness. And what do we need to do? We need to defend against them all. The practicality of securing 100% of your information assets and 100% of your telecommunication assets is a virtual impossibility. At F5, we believe there's another solution. We believe there's a solution which comes to mind when you entertain the thought experiment. What if there were no firewalls? And the answer that you come to is that there is an alternative. There is an alternative based upon the perfect identity of every user, a perfect understanding of the profile of every user, and the full proxy isolation of every application that serves them. And that is something that we uniquely offer to our customers and to our partners. We think it's time to rethink your security architecture. We think once the world reapproaches, takes a different stand on security, that we'll be able to utterly unlock all of the latent value that's sitting in all of our enterprises and leverage so many of the new applications, so many of the new capabilities to get the types of returns of the examples that I gave earlier today. We believe the time is now. And we're going to spend a lot of time trying to demonstrate that to you over the next 2 days. And to take this whole discussion one level up and give you a little bit more color on exactly what we're talking about, we're now going to bring our security leader for engineering in the United States up onto the stage, Gary New. Gary will join you, and thank you all very much for your time here today. It's great to have you with us.